Good afternoon. I'm Alan Brown, and I'm a member of the StolenYouth Board.
And I'm Scott Gallagher. We're your co-chairs for today's luncheon.
Ladies and gentlemen, kids in Seattle are being sold for sex. As many as 500 kids are sold every day, time and time again, and some are as young as 11 years old. And today, the majority of these kids are being pursued and trafficked online. But how in this digital age do we protect our kids from these predators? Well, it starts with a commitment like you've made today, a commitment you made to be here now, to intervene, and to make a difference. My kids, aged 12 and 14, are here today, and honestly, I can't fathom the idea of them or any child being trafficked for sex, beaten, raped, sexually abused. But that is the reality with trafficking. It's happening right now, every day in Seattle.
So you've been hearing a familiar sound, and we all know it. It's a notification sound you hear on your phone, your laptop, your iPad, when you've got an email or a text, or maybe comments from someone on Facebook. But you're hearing it today for a different reason.
2 weeks ago, we posted an ad online, an ad offering a child for sale for sex. But here's why we posted it: to show you how big and how horrifying this problem really is, and that it exists right here in our backyard.
Don't worry, the ad is not a real ad. But the notifications you're hearing actually are real. They are real responses to the ad that was placed from real people looking for sex from children.
And these responses are coming from down the street, around the corner, in our local neighborhoods. We know because we tracked it. They're coming from Bellevue, Capitol Hill, Queen Anne, Kirkland, Mercer Island, Tacoma. And there were a lot of responses, a lot of them. Every minute and 20 seconds, we got a response to that ad. That means that every 90 seconds, someone attempted to buy a child for sex. Fighting this terrible problem is the work that we're doing at StolenYouth. But by forming a coalition of experts, we're making a difference every day, one child at a time.
But there's so much more to be done, and that's why everyone is here today. And we're hoping that you can help us with this much-needed funds for expanding our work. Our goal, of course, is to helping children one at a time to helping children, all children.
Now, we do have some good news for you. 2 weeks ago, we had a huge win when Backpage.com, the prolific website for buying and selling children for sex, was taken down by the federal government. And in that 2 weeks, the CEO of Backpage has pled guilty to human trafficking. And while this is a big win, and we should celebrate that, the fight is not over, because there are still 150 sites that have been identified where children are being trafficked. Now, we are making progress. So for the next 50 minutes, let us educate you and inspire you. Let us encourage you to join the fight against the atrocity that is child sex trafficking.
Our goal, of course, is more laughter and less. So allow us now to show you a short video that illustrates what child sex trafficking actually is. After that, you'll hear more about how we're working to eradicate this insidious crime against our kids. In closing, we'd like to thank everyone truly for being here. We appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
As well-versed as most of us may be about our money and the nation's financial systems, there exists a dark, thriving underground economy that the vast majority of Americans know next to nothing about. The selling of children for sex is a business. It's called child sex trafficking, and it generates roughly $120 million a year in Seattle alone. We're talking about an economy that carries a monumental cost, a human cost. And this is how child sex traffickers do business. It's all about supply and demand. First, the trafficker, most often male, looks for someone to sell, typically targeting those most vulnerable, those easiest to manage and manipulate: children. He'll likely begin his search on social media platforms where conversations are anonymous, widespread, and easy to start. He'll then single out and attempt to engage girls and boys. teens and preteens with whom he can find an in, a topic over which he and the child can bond. And from that bond, the young person's trust is born and the relationship begins. The typical child sex trafficker might initiate a conversation by promising a kid a job, drugs, or alcohol. Or he may offer protection from a dangerous situation at home. But as he gains control, psychological control over the child, the trafficker's sway becomes greater and more menacing. He may even resort to the making of violent threats to force the victim to remain engaged. And as he pulls the youngster closer to him and a sense of dependency is formed, that child slowly becomes more isolated from family and friends. And this is the point at which the trafficker puts him or her up for sale. Sadly, surprisingly, the demand is there, and the internet makes transacting easy. Through what is considered a pretty seamless and sophisticated system, the child sex trafficker uses a variety of websites to connect with buyers. And who are these buyers? They're people you may not suspect: teachers, pastors, police officers, and judges, the guy next door. And despite their different professions and backgrounds, these criminals share two things in common: they're male and they're abusers, adults consciously choosing to purchase children for sex. In the end, the trafficker gets the money, the buyer gets his sex, and the child, the victim, is exploited and sold and sold and sold again. These boys and girls are minors. Legally, they cannot consent to a sexual experience. This is sexual exploitation. This is trafficking. This is the human rights issue of our time.
Good afternoon. My name is Val Ritchie, and I am a prosecutor for King County and a proud StolenYouth board member. A few weeks ago, I met a young survivor of sex trafficking named Lily. She spoke about how, at age 12, she was lured by false promises of love and support into the streets and into exploitation, not at all different from what you just heard. She talked about how she was sold out of a drug house to men who paid for sex, of the fear and pain and abuse she felt. But those early days, as sort of crazy as it is to say, weren't the worst that it got for her. Because for all that she suffered at that time, it was nothing compared to what happened when her trafficker decided to start advertising her on the internet. She said it was like before, but so much more. Now, instead of word of mouth or the passers in the street, hundreds of men could find her and buy access to her, one after another after another. I remember her looking up as she was talking about this at this point and saying, "It happened so fast." For this girl, something so simple as a website accelerated her exploitations in ways that we really can't imagine. It's an understatement to say that technology permeates virtually every aspect of modern life. Technology is a great accelerator in so many positive ways. It can produce more, design more, sell more. You can order a car, watch a movie on a plane, buy groceries with the push of a button or two. But maybe instead of accelerator, I should also say accelerant, because technology can also be the gas on a fire that causes great harm when it is misused. I'm sure the original engineers and designers who built most technologies never contemplated the abuse of their creations in ways that harm children, and yet it happens, and it happens right here in Seattle. As Alan said, we found over 150 websites where men, women, and children have been sold for sex. And some of those sites have thousands of advertisements. Various studies estimate that 60 to 75% of all trafficked children are trafficked online. Over the past 5 years, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children saw a 846% increase in reports of suspected child sex trafficking to the cyber tip line. Thousands of cases. And when you think back to that girl, that 12-year-old girl, Lily, and you think that she is just one of those children, and for her, how her experience of technology was that it made her exploitation so much more powerful and so much more awful, well, it makes your heart hurt. The abuse of technology isn't limited to just websites. Kids are recruited by traffickers on social media sites like Facebook. Traffickers use smartphones to control and track their victims. Buyers film their victims and share it in ways that make exploitation permanent. And we just saw our first case where a buyer paid for sex with a child using cryptocurrency. The magnitude of the problem can be overwhelming, and I assure you there are many times when I and those who I work with want to throw up our hands and walk away. For those of us in prosecution and law enforcement, the realization that we can't arrest our way out of the problem can be demoralizing, particularly when you watch how the scope of the problem continues to grow with the abuse of technology. But it turns out that we live in a place where people are not afraid of a challenge, where they will fight to protect what they care about, and that includes, most importantly, our children. A place where, when you say that the police can't do this alone and we need a community response, the community responds. Over the past few years, at a time when the problem of sex trafficking was increasing with no end in sight, partnerships began to form and to coalesce around the idea that technology can be abused, but it can also be a sword for good. Private businesses, police, philanthropists, volunteers, community activists came together for a full-court press, and they began designing the tools for the experts to use new strategies that have begun to turn the tide in this fight. Let me give you a few examples. When sex buyers use search engines to find prostitution, Seattle Against Slavery figured out how to tie public awareness ads to those searches so that now when a sex buyer tries to buy sex through Google or Bing, he is hit with an ad urging him to think twice. A virtual stop sign, if you will, on the road to exploitation. Millions of these ads have been shown over the last couple years to deter buyers, and it works. We are seeing the traffic on those sites decline. An amazing partnership between volunteers from Microsoft and Seattle Against Slavery also built a robot that can pose as a trafficking victim on the websites to catch men trying to buy them without a single victim being harmed. These bots are now being used in cities across the country to disrupt the buying process at the point of sale. Another amazing partnership between these tech volunteers, and I want to give a strong shout out to these tech volunteers from Microsoft who have really been amazing. When they work a long day and then meet with us at 9 o'clock at night to try to figure out these things, it really lifts your spirits, I can tell you. These tech volunteers, Seattle Against Slavery, and service providers saw development of a new tool that allows service providers to actually connect with people being exploited on these websites and offer them help. Imagine offering help to every kid on every website in the country with the push of a button. That's a reality. That's something that can now happen because of these initiatives. And when you find these kids, you have to do something with them. You have to offer them the services and support that they need, and that's where StolenYouth supported organizations like Youth Care step in, building the services to lift these children up. These innovative approaches and these services were supported from the beginning by StolenYouth, which had the vision to believe a different world was possible. You want to talk about seed funding? Well, we are seeing the seed, the sprout, and the blossom of a new day and a new approach. These heroes are reclaiming technology for good, And these are amazing innovations that are being sought after by cities and states across the country. This region has become a model for the rest of the country on how to build a community-based response. And I'm not kidding about this. I was just in DC a week or two ago, and a national leader on this issue got up and spoke about how the rest of the country needs to be adopting the Seattle-King County model. We also need to work on our marketing, because that's not a great name, but we'll come up with something. In the face of a daunting and scary future, we have shown the country that we are up to the challenge, and we are doing the things that no one else is doing. There are two really important pieces to this success: a community that is willing to step up, roll up its sleeves, and work together, and support from amazing, amazing leaders like StolenYouth, who have leveraged community resources, who have built the capacity to do the hard work. Right now, in this city, right now, we have the will, we have the expertise, we have the human power, and now we need you. Thank you.
I met Patty 26 years ago. We were middle school counselors at Zion Preparatory Academy, and we became very close and shared ideas of what was really important to us and how we wanted to make a difference in the world. We didn't know what we wanted to do, but we knew in our hearts that we wanted to make a difference and impact children's lives until we met Jane and Jennifer and were introduced to the movie Sold.
When we first read the award-winning novel, Sold, just tore me apart. This riveting story about this young girl from India, and when we learned more about this issue, we knew that this was something that needed to be brought to light, so we made the film, Sold.
After seeing this film, a group of us decided to go to India to see what was going on and to see how we could actually make a difference in the global issue of child trafficking.
Going to India was really eye-opening for our group. And we came back here with the knowledge and realized that we had a problem in our own backyard, in a city as wonderful as Seattle has a problem as well. And so we realized we had to do something with what we had learned.
When we got back from India and we had experienced the horrific nature of the problem over there, we realized that the people on the ground in India were doing amazing things, and we were super inspired by that. And we gathered a group of women, and we pulled together a board and decided we were going to raise money. So we raised a lot of money the first year and went to Youth Care, who was the organization that was doing the housing and the programming for the children. And Melinda Giovango said, "Thank you so much again." And with very little ego, she said, "We need to spread these funds across a coalition that can fight this issue from many different angles. We will not solve the problem unless we bring these organizations already doing the work on the ground together and support them." And that's what we did. And that's how StolenYouth was created.
So through the coalition, we're able to provide a very well-rounded approach to ending sex trafficking in our community. The StolenYouth funding allows us to have a sustainable model of care for these young people. We're able to ensure that every young person that needs help has access to the kind of housing, trauma-informed therapy, the opportunity to participate in education and employment, and really create a pathway out of sex trafficking for the young people that we serve. Over the course of the last 6 years, Youth Care has been able to serve over 600 young people and ensure that they have an opportunity for safe housing, education and employment, and a brighter future.
We've created a digital software platform that uses internet chatbots to steer potential buyers into treatment. The Seattle Against Slavery software platform not only stops buyers, it also connects hundreds of potential victims with life-saving services. StolenYouth funding has allowed us to intercept over 10,000 attempts to buy sex online this year alone.
We're finally getting solid data on who these kids really are who are being trafficked in our state. We found, for example, that half of them are boys that changes the game for us, because the responses that are appropriate for girls are not going to work for boys, and we need to help them all.
Thanks to Stolen Youth, hotels now have the training to be able to prevent sex trafficking from happening in their properties. In addition, businesses across Washington are starting to adopt policies to stand against trafficking. One huge win this year was the Port of Seattle has now adopted a strategy to identify and prevent trafficking as people are coming through our ports.
Our groundbreaking Sex Buyers Intervention program started about 4 years ago, and since that time, over 300 men have successfully completed the class. This would not have been possible without Stolen Youth's funding of our innovative collaborative.
With your help, Stolen Youth is making a big and lasting impact in our community. We've locked arms with our coalition members, and we're attacking this issue end to end, from prevention to wraparound human services, advocacy, awareness building, all the way to jobs for survivors. We're unpacking the issue and having the hard conversations around the root causes of this issue and its disparities around gender, race, sexual orientation, unstable housing, and economic inequality. We've helped kids as young as 11 years old who have been trafficked regain their lives, their childhood, their future. And through the innovative and leading edge work in prevention and education of our coalition members, we're taking steps to ensure that not one more kid is trafficked for sex in our community. The Stolen Youth Coalition has developed a great model, and it's working. It's a model for other major cities to follow to address issues of child sex trafficking in their communities. Together, we've accomplished a great deal, but we're just getting started.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Thomas, and I am the police chief for the city of Kent. And first, I would like to thank Stolen Youth for the work that they do, and thank you for allowing me the great honor that I have today to introduce our keynote speaker, Kira Dubeck. And I'll just give you a brief story of how this came about. I'm fortunate to have incredibly good detectives that really care about this issue that came to me and said, Chief, this is really a big deal, and there are really people being significantly abused, and they need our help, and we should be doing everything we can to help them. So with that, I provided my full support, and in working with Val Ritchie and the prosecutor's office, and as an organization, we do John Stings once a month at a minimum to try to do our part to address the supply side or the demand side. So with that work, we partnered, the City of Kent Police Department partnered with Kent Youth and Family Services. And we said, we need an advocate. We need to do more, and we can do more in our community. So we partnered with Kent Youth and Family Services and got an advocate for our community, which has been an incredible help. Within the first month, I believe Kira had 12 clients of young kids that she was helping that were in the sex trade lifestyle that she has helped to get out. We are incredibly fortunate that we got a person in Kira as our advocate that understands the lifestyle and can relate with the victims and do an incredible, incredible job. She immediately was accepted by our police officers. She works part-time in the police department. She has the passion to help, and she does an absolutely incredible job in our community. We could not have asked for a better person. And she's so passionate, she has no problem coming into my office to advocate for others throughout the entire state. When she hears about others, victims or survivors who are not being treated properly by law enforcement, she's come to me and said, Chief, would you talk to law enforcement in this area of the state, help them understand that by doing what they did in this case, how they could help serve the victims and survivors much better.
It is an honor and a privilege to be with all of you this afternoon to share some of the experiences that women like myself face. Why it happens, how it happens, and what it can look like when we receive the support that we deserve when we're exiting the life. And I understand that some of you might not understand what I mean when I refer to being prostituted as the life. We call it the life because it's a life that follows its own code and laws. It's a completely different world. The grooming process began at an early age for me. There was a system of instability, violence, poverty, and addiction that was prevalent within my home. It was like I was born for this and that there wasn't any other outcome that could happen. My mom left my dad when I was 10 months old and took me to Alaska with only a backpack full of my clothes. She wasn't confident that we would have a place to stay when we arrived, but that move gave me the greatest gift of my childhood, my papa. And my papa was the man who raised me. He potty trained me. He taught me my ABCs. Some of my best childhood memories include him taking me down to our little cafe for hot chocolate with this pile of whipped cream on it. When I was nearly 4, we moved back to Washington, and I reconnected with my father. I visited him on alternating weekends, and it was on one of these weekends that my parents were exchanging me that I noticed that things were very different. My mom she was wearing an awful lot of makeup, and even at that age, I knew that it was very unusual. My papa had tested positive for HIV. He decided that leaving would protect us, and while I was away that weekend, the Suquamish police responded to a domestic violence call because my papa had smashed a rotary phone over my mom's face when she tried to force him to stay. All my 4-year-old self knew is that my papa was gone, and he was the man who protected me from my mom's lacking parenting skills. In a strange twist of fate, a year and a half later, my mom would marry the officer that responded to that 911 call. My mom was happy again, but I wasn't. What I can remember from that time is that his idea of playing with a 6-year-old involved tightly handcuffing my hands behind my back and laughing at me as I struggled on the living room floor. He called me every name in the book, things that I had never heard, I didn't even know the meaning of. I was 8 when my mom finally left him. But it didn't stop there. Next was California Guy. He and my mom shared an affinity for copious amounts of drugs and alcohol. Early on in their relationship, there were several domestic violence calls that at 10, I had to place. I had witnessed more abusive relationship patterns at the age of 10 than anybody should ever see in a lifetime. His parents, both retired law enforcement, lived not too far from us. And one weekend while we were house sitting for them, my mom was expressing some of her concerns about the relationship, and he retrieved one of their firearms and threatened to kill himself. Moving to Oregon was going to fix all of their problems. It was going to be a fresh start for all of us. I was going to reinvent myself. I was finally going to be cool and popular and well-liked. The first day of middle school, I went to go and catch the bus on Busy River Road in Eugene. It was also the first day that cars full of men whistled, honked, and yelled at me. This happened every single day that I lived there. Not far into 6th grade, a boy on the bus began cornering me and touching me. And nobody at the school ever asked how I felt. Nobody ever offered me counseling. They were more concerned with punishing him and covering it up. At this point, I was accustomed to not trusting myself. My life was full of being told that I was not hungry or thirsty or tired or needing to use the bathroom. Simple things, basic human things. The adults in my life convinced me that my needs spiritually, physically, emotionally, and mentally didn't exist, or that I had imagined them. I remember wanting to grow up so badly so I could just get away from it all. Looking back, I never felt like I fit in. I was poor. I was always the new kid. Like I was canned chicken from the food bank poor. Any money that I made beginning at the age of 12, I had to buy my own clothes and school supplies. When I began babysitting, I had unsupervised access to the internet. Here, I discovered dating chat rooms where I could be anybody who I wanted to be. I didn't have to be 12 anymore. Online, I could be 14. And I found so many adult men that were happy to talk with a 14-year-old girl. They flooded me with compliments about how mature and intelligent I was, and how beautiful I was. And then they began asking me a lot of personal questions about my body. They were so nice to me that I felt obligated to answer them. They wanted to meet me. Now, as a child, when you don't receive the support from the adults in your life, attention, even the wrong kind of attention, will sufficiently fill the void left behind by a lack of love. When I was 12, I met this awesome guy on the internet and arranged to meet him at my school. When he arrived, he wasn't who he said he was. I didn't ever see him again. Fast forward to freshman year, we moved again. Mom and California guy were using drugs again. Things got worse. It was a constant roller coaster at home. One day I would get into trouble for something which the previous day I wouldn't have. I never knew what to expect. The physical abuse continued from my mom. I experienced the losses of both of my grandfathers exactly 3 weeks apart, and that year I was so depressed I began self-harming. So often growing up, the only friend that I had was my cat, Pyewacket. I had my first drink at 6, and at 14, in high school, I found myself taking water bottles full of my mom's alcohol to school. Self-medicating was the only way that I felt normal. I wanted to be anybody but me, and substances offered me that. I went to parties, and it would be in one of these many situations I would be raped for the first time. The rape only increased my substance needs, and I didn't have the money to purchase drugs. But I soon found that men would give them to me in exchange for certain things. Unbelievably, things got even worse at home when California guy threatened to pour an entire bottle of soap down my throat. I ran away from home. My plan was to get emancipated. The owner of the shop that I worked in sometimes offered me money to have sex with him. I needed money to buy a car to get a job to be able to support myself. He was unwilling to give me the kind of money that I was looking for, so thankfully that never happened. In December of 2003, my father came down to Oregon and took me to his house in Woodinville. After years of telling teachers, counselors, friends, parents, my dad, and other family members that things were bad at home, finally I got to escape. On New Year's Eve, just after I moved to Washington, I met my exploiter. He was 20, and everyone was afraid of him. Because I was his, I was going to be safe. Not even a month into us dating, I woke up to him hitting me, demanding to know where I had been, convinced that I had cheated on him. And he said that he loved me, that's why he was so upset, because he loved me. And I was going to prove to him that I was trustworthy. As a minor, he exposed me to pornography, raped me, beat me, manipulated me, and dismantled my identity. He broke me. For 4 years, he broke me. Everything had a price. If he bought food or Valentine's Day flowers, anything, I was going to pay for it. I owed him. If I fought it, it just ended up hurting more. I was almost 20 when I finally escaped him. I squared up. I stopped doing drugs. I got a job. I tried to be normal and raise my 2 beautiful kids. There was so much trauma that I was still self-medicating with alcohol that at the age of 22, I got my first DUI. I lost my good job. I couldn't support my kids anymore, so they went to go and live with their father, and I found myself homeless again. When you're pretty, men will give you a place to stay, and they will give you drugs because you're easier to control. I was so broken that I was past caring. After another abusive relationship, where I was kicked out in the snow with no phone, no car, no money, and having to walk 5 miles through Hilltop in Tacoma, I was done. I'd had enough with men having power over me. That's the thing about the life. It's coercive. It disguises itself as financial freedom. When I got involved with online prostitution, I was finally going to be in control. I believed that pretty woman lie. One response came from Caesar, who referred to himself as a marketing manager. He said that I was too pretty to be on Craigslist, and so he created a profile on another site for me and began taking a weekly cut. No amount of money or drugs could fix what was going on inside of me. I had wanted to die since I was 14. And I was absolutely positive that I deserved this life. On December 10th, 2012, I was plucked out of the life. I delivered myself to police by totaling my car into one of their vehicles, and thankfully nobody was injured. The 90 days that I spent in jail gave me the clarity to finally leave the life behind. I completed treatment, but addressing my substance use was only a part of the problem. At 2 years out of the life, 2 years, I was still angry, broken, alone, and voiceless. So in 2015, I promised myself that I was going to face all of my fears. And after an impromptu Google search, I found the Organization for Prostitution Survivors, OPS, an organization that StolenYouth provided seed money to. I didn't have the language to understand what had happened to me, and I was so deeply ashamed. Because of OPS, I was able to receive support, training, and gained so many valuable mentors. I need a space where people got it and I didn't have to explain. I was the first participant in their employment program and later became a staff member. Today, I'm over the moon because I get to serve on their board, the board of an organization that has given me so much. Today, as Chief Thomas mentioned, I get to work at Kent Youth and Family Services today alongside Kent Police Department to serve commercially sexually exploited children. There were so many times that an intervention could have been made. The only reason why I get to be a present mom, have meaningful relationships, and have been able to rebuild my life is because I received services. It's mind-blowing to me that I get to work in this field, have co-founded with other survivors, Survivor Impact Group, with the help of StolenYouth, sit on a board, and so much more. There's a quote by Richard Bach that succinctly illustrates this entire journey for me. You are led through your lifetime by the inner learning creature, the playful spiritual being, which is your real self. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. With that, I finally get to say what I came here to say. To each and every one of you in this room, from the deepest places in my soul, thank you so much for giving me exactly what I needed when you did not even know me. I get to thank all of the people who support StolenYouth and believe in the mission to end the exploitation of children in Washington State. A child like I once was, but never got to be.
Thank you, Kira. I know all of you expect me to cry up here, but I didn't think I was going to be as choked up as I am. But whenever I hear these stories, I'm just brought down into my heart. And also looking out in this ballroom 6 years ago, I could have never imagined almost 1,000 people in this room here to support the work that we're doing. And I'm so proud and honored to be up here to witness the amazing support and love and passion that all of you have for these vulnerable children and for the issue of child sex trafficking. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days to be here today. It just means so much to all of us. 6 years ago, we also didn't see the extent of the dark web. The unstoppable efforts of traffickers and buyers to use technology to groom and traffic our children. This issue has expanded from the streets to our phones and our computers. And while traffickers and buyers are using technology to continue to feed this horrible crime, we are using technology and human efforts to stop them in their tracks. This sound, it is a painful reminder that there is a market for children out there, a very real present market, even today in this beautiful, prosperous, progressive city. But this sound, this beautiful silence, this is the sound of children who are safe, who are secure, who have their lives and their innocence. The sound of silence of children once trafficked, who have their dignity restored, who are reunited with their families, and are on the path to being happy and healthy. This is the sound we will achieve. Today, with the power of your voice and your commitment and your resources, you can send a loud and resounding message that will drown out and end this insidious sound we have been hearing today.
Because of StolenYouth's work with our partners locally and nationally, we've made progress. We've accomplished a few successes. Online platforms are now accountable for knowingly facilitating sex trafficking. Also, Backpage.com has been shuttered and their leaders indicted. Yes, our model is working, but we're not done. There's still a long road ahead of us to maintain the silence and achieve our much bolder mission, which is ending child sex trafficking in Washington state. Even as we celebrate these successes, opportunists are aggressively positioning to fill the void left by Backpage.com and profit from the sale of our children online for sex. There's more we must do to achieve the silence we want for our community, for our children. Together, we must fill the void. We must fill it with silence, services, hope, and the future we want for our youth that's free from child sex trafficking in our communities. So my husband and I are proud parents, like many of you in the room. We have 3 school-age girls who remind us why we fight every day to end this scourge in our community. I'm just going to tell you how I feel it. If you want to know, or if you want to see my inner mama bear, mess with my kids. Folk, traffickers are messing with our kids. And it's time that Mama and Papa Bear show up. Our youth need us. They need us to show up and to stand with them and to provide the prevention and education, the hope that they so desperately need right now. We must ensure that not one more of our children are sold for sex. Not one more, not ever, not on our watch. It's really up to us. So I ask you today, will you stand with us? Will you stand with our children? As you consider your gifts today, I want to share with you a meeting that I had recently. It was a meeting with one of our long-term supporters who said to me that they could really see the progress we're making. But they could also see what more there was to be done and the services that needed to be provided. And they just blew me away when they said, I want to stand even taller in an even bigger way with you, with StolenYouth, and to encourage others to stand too. They shared with me that today, for everyone that donates at least $250, they're going to match your donation dollar for dollar up to $100,000. I'm blown away. I was blown away then, and even as I say it, I'm even more blown away. What incredible inspiration for all of us to stand even taller, to achieve the lasting silence that we want for our children and our community. So I ask you again, will you stand with us? Together, we can really do this. So I want to thank you all for joining us today and for your support. We cannot do this without you, so thank you for your support in joining us. Table captains, you know what to do. Grab the envelopes, distribute them at your tables, and remember to collect them at the end. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for your support. And have a great afternoon.